I still get chills when I think about that night. The way the voice called my name, the way it sounded just like him. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend. Just me, Ethan, Lucas, and David, lifelong friends, escaping the city noise for a couple of days in the wild. We found a remote spot by a lake, deep in the forest, far from any cell signal or signs of civilization. The first night was uneventful. Just laughter, beer, and old stories around the fire. But the second night, that was when it happened. I woke up to the sound of someone whispering my name, Daniel. It was soft, barely above the rustling of the leaves outside, but it was clear. My eyes flicked open in the darkness of the tent, and my heart pounded as I turned my head. Ethan was asleep right beside me, his breathing steady and deep. Then I heard it again. Daniel, come here. I sat up, cold sweat dripping down my back. It wasn't just a whisper this time. It was a voice, and it sounded exactly like Ethan. But Ethan was right here, sleeping. I reached over and shook him slightly. Hey, wake up! Ethan groaned, half-conscious. What? He mumbled. I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? That he had just called me from outside? That his voice was somewhere in the trees? Before I could decide, the voice came again. Daniel, I need you, please. My blood ran cold. It was desperate now, urgent, and worse, it was moving. The sound was no longer just beyond our tent. It was shifting, circling. The others stirred, sensing my tension. Lucas groggily sat up. What's wrong? Then we heard it. A voice that was not quite Ethan's. Not anymore. And it was laughing. Ethan was awake now, sitting up beside me. What the hell was that? He whispered. None of us had an answer. The laughter outside had faded, but the forest felt wrong. Too quiet. Even the crickets had stopped chirping. Lucas unzipped the tent just enough to peek outside, his breath trembling. The fire had died down to embers, casting a faint glow over the campsite. Beyond that, nothing but darkness. Then David whispered, "Look at the trees." I followed his gaze, and my stomach turned to ice. Between the trees, just at the edge of the firelight, there were shadows. They weren't moving, not like a person would. They were shifting, stretching unnaturally between the trunks, like they were alive. A twig snapped. Something was there. I grabbed a flashlight and aimed it toward the trees. The beam cut through the dark, illuminating nothing, just empty woods. But the second I turned the light on, the shadows moved again. Closer this time. "Pack your stuff," Ethan muttered, his voice low and urgent. "We're leaving." No one argued. We moved quickly, shoving everything into our bags, hands shaking. The entire time, I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. As I zipped up my bag, I heard it again. "Daniel?" The voice was right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just empty space where the voice should have been. Then Lucas screamed. He was staring at the trees, flashlight shaking in his grip. There's something out there." We all turned just in time to see a tall, gaunt figure step between the trees, its face hidden in the shadows. It didn't move like a person. It swayed, as if it wasn't fully attached to this world. Then it grinned, and it spoke. In Ethan's exact voice, my entire body locked up. The thing in the woods was smiling, its lips stretching too wide, its face still shrouded in darkness. But the voice, "Daniel, come here." It was Ethan's voice, but it wasn't Ethan. Ethan was right beside me, frozen in terror. Lucas was the first to move. Run. We didn't hesitate. We grabbed what we could and bolted. The forest was pitch black beyond the campsite, branches clawing at our clothes, roots threatening to trip us. Behind us, the voice followed. "Daniel, don't leave me." It was running too. I didn't dare look back. I could hear it, its footsteps matching ours, but there was something wrong. They weren't the heavy steps of a person. They were lighter, scattered, like something with too many limbs. David was the first to reach the car. He fumbled with the keys, cursing under his breath. "Hurry, hurry, hurry." I risked one glance back. The fire had fully died out now, leaving only darkness. But I saw it. A shape, a tall, thin, hunched standing at the tree line. Watching. Waiting. Then it tilted its head, almost playfully, and whispered one last time. "See you soon, Daniel." The engine roared to life. We sped down the dirt road, not stopping until we were miles away. We never spoke of that night again. We never went back, but sometimes, late at night when everything is silent, I swear I can still hear my name, whispered from the dark. Story 2. The Shadows Among the Trees. I still get chills when I think about that weekend. We thought it would be a nostalgic trip, a way to reconnect with our grandfather's past. We were wrong. It was me, my older brother James, and our younger brother Eric. The three of us had always been close, and when James suggested we visit the old camping grounds our grandfather used to talk about, it felt like the perfect idea. A weekend in the woods, away from the world. The place was deep in the forest, far from any town or road. It hadn't been used in decades, but somehow we found it exactly as our grandfather had described. A small clearing with an old fire pit, surrounded by towering trees. The air smelled fresh, untouched. That first night, everything was fine. We set up our tents, built a fire, and talked about the stories Grandpa used to tell. The ones about the strange shadows that moved through the woods at night. James laughed it off. He probably just wanted to scare us. I wasn't so sure. At some point, Eric got quiet. He was staring past the fire into the trees. "Did you see that?" he asked. James and I turned. There was nothing but darkness. "See what?" I asked. Eric hesitated. "I thought I saw something move." We brushed it off as paranoia. But then, as the fire crackled and the night deepened, I saw it too. A shape. Dark, shifting just beyond the firelight. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was watching. None of us spoke. None of us moved. We just sat there, staring into the blackness, our breath caught in our throats. Then, out of the silence, we heard footsteps. Soft, slow, circling us. I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it toward the trees. Nothing. But when I turned the light away, the shadows moved again. Closer this time, and in the dirt around the fire, something else caught my eye. Footprints. But here's the thing. They didn't lead into the woods. They led out of it, as if something had just appeared there. A cold dread settled over us. The footprints weren't ours. They were fresh, clear in the dirt around the fire. And the worst part, they had no starting point. It was as if something had just materialized in the clearing. James was the first to break the silence. The shadows were still there, shifting unnaturally, as if the darkness itself was alive. Eric was breathing fast. I don't think we're alone. We backed toward the tents, too afraid to turn our backs completely. The fire was dying down, and with each flicker, the darkness crept closer. Then, a whisper, a voice so faint it could have been the wind, but it wasn't. James, we froze. The whisper came from the trees, from the black void between the trunks. It said my brother's name. James gripped my arm, his nails digging into my skin. His face was pale. Did you hear that? Before I could answer, the whisper came again. Eric. A shiver ran down my spine. It was calling us by name. The fire gave one last pop, and then darkness. Panic set in. We fumbled for our flashlights, hands shaking. The second we turned them on, we saw it. The shadows weren't just moving, they were getting closer. I could make out shapes now, figures, not quite human, but not entirely formless either. Tall, thin, stretching unnaturally between the trees. Then one of them stepped forward. It wasn't walking, it was gliding, silent as the grave. And though I couldn't see a face, I knew it was looking right at me. We ran. I don't remember making the decision. 1 second, we were frozen, staring at that thing in the trees. The next, we were sprinting toward the tents, hearts pounding, breath coming in ragged gasps. Eric tripped first. I heard him hit the ground hard, a choked scream escaping his lips. James and I turned back to help him, but he was already getting up faster than he should have been able to. Hi, he started, but then he stopped. His face went pale. They're closer, he whispered. I turned. The figures had moved. They hadn't walked, hadn't made a sound, but now they were only a few feet from us, standing just at the edge of our light. Still shapeless, still shifting, but I swear I could feel their eyes. James grabbed my arm. Get to the car. Now. We didn't pack. We didn't grab anything. We just ran. The shadows followed. I could hear them, a faint rustling that wasn't quite footsteps, wasn't quite movement, more like whispers in the wind, just out of reach. Our car was parked a quarter-mile away. It felt like miles. I don't know how, but they kept up with us, never falling behind, never getting closer, just waiting. We reached the car, threw open the doors, and sped off without looking back. Did we finally breathe? No one spoke the entire drive home. We just stared straight ahead, afraid that if we looked in the rearview mirror, we'd see something staring back. The next morning, James checked his phone. There was no signal at the campsite, but his phone had been recording audio all night. He played it back. Most of it was just wind, rustling leaves, the occasional crackle of our fire. Then, at 3:13 a.m., the whisper started, indistinct at first, then clearer. James, Eric, Nathan, my name. The last thing we heard before the recording cut off, a low, distorted voice. Come back. We never did. Story 3. The Man with White Eyes. I don't like talking about that night. Even now, just thinking about it makes my hands shake. But if I don't tell this story, I feel like it will keep haunting me. It was supposed to be a normal trip, just a simple getaway into the wilderness. My girlfriend Lisa and I had been dating for 2 years, and we wanted a quiet weekend away from everything. No phones, no work, no distractions. We found a secluded spot deep in a national reserve, far from the usual campsites. The ranger at the entrance warned us against camping in certain areas, saying they were off limits for a reason. But we didn't listen. We wanted to be alone. That first day was peaceful. We set up our tent, collected firewood, and cooked dinner under the stars. The silence was deafening, but we enjoyed the tranquility. Then, around midnight, Lisa woke me up. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I listened. Nothing. Just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. But Lisa was tense. I swear I heard footsteps. I reassured her, telling her it was probably an animal, and we eventually fell back asleep. But then, at 3 a.m., I woke up. Something felt wrong. The air was colder than before, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. And then I saw it, standing at the edge of the trees, barely visible in the dim moonlight, was a man. Tall, unnaturally thin, completely still. But the worst part was his eyes. They were pure white. No pupils. No irises. Just two glowing orbs staring straight at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, he smiled. I don't know how long I stared at him. Seconds? Minutes? Time had no meaning in that moment. All I could feel was the cold creeping into my chest, the primal fear hammering in my ribs. And then, without warning, he moved. Not like a normal person. His body didn't sway or adjust. He just shifted, like a film skipping a few frames. 1 second he was standing at the tree line. The next he was 10 feet closer. Still staring. Still smiling. I gasped, scrambling back inside the tent, shaking Lisa awake. "There's someone out there," I whispered, my voice trembling. She blinked, confused. "What? Who?" I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to answer. Grabbing my flashlight, I unzipped the tent just enough to shine it outside. The beam cut through the darkness. But he was gone. The forest was silent. Too silent. Lisa sat up, rubbing her arms. "It's freezing. Did the fire go out?" That's when I noticed it. Our campfire was dead, completely smothered, as if something had poured dirt over it, but we hadn't touched it. And then we saw them. The symbols, drawn in the dirt around our tent, forming a perfect circle. Strange, twisting lines, unfamiliar yet somehow wrong. Lisa grabbed my arm. "We need to go." I nodded. I didn't care that it was the middle of the night. We weren't staying here. But as I reached for the tent zipper, a shadow passed by, right outside, and then a voice. Low, whispering, right next to my ear. "You shouldn't have come here." I can't describe what happened next without feeling the same cold terror creep up my spine. It's a memory that has been burned into my mind, a nightmare that lingers long after I should have woken up. I knew we couldn't stay, not with him so close, not with those symbols drawn on the ground taunting us. But as we scrambled to pack, Lisa froze. She was staring at the trees. I turned, my heart skipping a beat. There, standing just at the edge of the clearing, was the man again. His figure was even more distinct now, glowing faintly in the moonlight, like something not entirely human. His eyes, those horrifically white eyes, were locked onto me, but there was no smile this time, no amusement, only the void. I pulled Lisa's arm, my voice breaking as I whispered, "We have to go, now." We sprinted toward the car, but the man didn't follow. He didn't need to. I heard it then, though, a sound in the trees, not footsteps, not breathing, but something like a low hum, as if the forest itself was shifting, bending. I didn't dare look back. The car seemed miles away. My legs were burning, my breath ragged as we neared it. We reached the door, and I fumbled for the keys. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely unlock the door. And then, the humming stopped. I looked up. There was no one behind us. We rushed inside, and the engine roared to life as I slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The woods blurred past in the rearview mirror. I didn't feel safe until we reached the nearest town and pulled into a gas station. Only then did we stop, shaking and wide-eyed. We didn't speak. Lisa's eyes darted to the back seat, then to the front window. She looked at me, her face pale. "We're not going back, are we?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I knew we weren't. Later that night, I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls, just the recording. It was the same as before. The rustling of leaves, the crackling of the fire. But near the end of the recording, there was something new. A whisper. "You shouldn't have gone." We never spoke about it again, but I'm still haunted by that image, those white, empty eyes waiting for us. The thing in the trees was real, and it knows my name.